Good afternoon and welcome to today's Home Furnishings Association webinar, which we're going to be talking about the future of home furnishings retail and just the state of business today. And we've got Todd Wanek with us. And for those of you who don't know, I'm Shannon Williams. I'm HFA's CEO, and I will be your host for today. We are absolutely thrilled to have Todd with us. He is the president and CEO of Ashley Furniture Industries, and he's also HFA's 2025 Trailblazer Award recipient. And we'll be honoring him this weekend and his showroom if you are able to come out and celebrate his achievement with us. But he is here to share his perspective on the current state of the furniture industry and then where we're headed. So Todd, thank you so much for taking time out of your market. I know that you guys are already headed and very busy. So let's go ahead and jump right in because we have a lot to talk about. You've obviously seen this industry navigate through lots of major cycles. What do you believe really defines resilience for the home furnishings businesses today?
Thank you, Shannon. I'm honored to be here today. Always enjoy my time with you and HFA and the HFA members and, the great retailers. As we talk about resilience with the furniture industry, it's interesting because we are an industry made up of entrepreneurs. And this industry has always been scrappy and has a lot of grit. And, they're always trying to find ways to reinvent themselves and develop a competitive advantage. So I'm always impressed with this industry because everybody's connected to their business, their employees, the communities. And I think that drives a lot of people. But, I think our industry, more than any other industry, takes things really seriously. We look at it, they look at it, 'cause it's a personal industry for most people, many family-owned businesses. So it's very personal. And I think that's what makes it unique. And I think that's also what makes it resilient, is the fact that, this is an industry that's a lot of privately held organizations, entrepreneurial, scrappy, multi-generational. And I think there's just a belief structure that, this is what they want to do and they have a passion for it.
That's very fair. So we got to jump into the very big topic, I think, on everyone's mind. And so all the questions today are coming directly from the people who are attending, our retailers. We got to start with tariffs and global trade. And I know Ashley's obviously operating on this very massive global scale. How tariffs influence the decisions Ashley's making about where to manufacture and how to distribute product?
Yeah. Well, first I want to start out by saying there's a lot of noise, right? A lot of noise. As a matter of fact, I think we're all probably connected to these devices now based on what's going on, meaning your phone or news. And it seems like every day, I'm looking at like, what happened today, right? What occurred? What was announced? And you're trying to figure all that stuff out. And I really use the Stephen Covey analogy and story about, a circle of concern and your circle of control. So I'd say, first of all, you've got to understand that that's a circle of concern. It affects your business, of course, but you've got to focus on what you can control. And you've got to control the decisions within your organization to operate with excellence. But, regarding the tariffs, I think if this is a surprise to anybody, they weren't paying attention to the conversation that was had during the run-up to the election. In 2024, Trump was announcing tariffs. He said China is the enemy. There was a lot of conversations around what was going to happen. In the summer of 2024, he said he wants $750 billion of tariffs. That's his number. So, we looked at that and we analyzed it and said, that's a big number. As a matter of fact, if you look at all the imports in the United States, that means there's got to be an average tariff rate of 17%, if you just do the math. So you can understand that that's probably the average tariff rate that we're looking at. And we also knew that China was going to be a threat and a problem, that President Trump was going to be very aggressive with China. So we read the tea leaves early, and I think every leader has got a responsibility to see things before others see it and study what they think is going to happen on a global economy and that can impact their business and then make the necessary changes. So we've been out of China to a certain degree for many years, but we basically put the gauntlet down and said as of April 1, we'll have no more business with mainland China because the risk was too high. I believe when you look at the other countries, I don't believe that 46% is going to stick with Vietnam. They're currently at 10. Trump announced 46% several weeks ago, and then he reduced it down to 10%. I think you've got to go back to the math and say that the math shows us that there's going to have to be an average tariff rate of about 17%. And that's the number he's managing to. I believe that he's got a vision for what he wants to achieve with this economy and what he wants for DOGE cuts, what he wants for tariffs. There's only 4 triggers he has to pull: expense reduction, tariffs, taxes, and growth. Those are his four triggers that he's got to pull. Now, growth is obviously hard. You've got to stimulate the economy to get some growth, but we know what he's doing to tariffs. We know what he's doing to Doge. We kind of know what he's doing with taxes. So I believe the tariffs are here to stay, and I think most countries are probably going to be dealing with a 10 to 25% tariff rate. So that's kind of what we put into our planning. And Shannon, to be quite honest, we're really pivoting back to a diversified supply chain. We've got to have, and Ashley's always had a diversified supply chain, and I think everybody needs to be looking at diversification. I think many retailers and other companies became too singular, and they had too much business overseas instead of saying, I need diversification, and the U.S. is massive diversification.
You spoke about those four pillars: expenses, tariffs, taxes, and growth. Obviously, there is a little bit of economic uncertainty. So where do you see demand holding steady, or where do you see that growth coming through in the next 24 months?
Well, I think that there's a lot of conversation about a recession right now. And let's understand what a recession is. A recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. It doesn't mean -10, -20, -30% growth. It could mean -0.5% growth. It's just negative growth. So I think we're probably going to have 1 or 2 quarters of 0 to 2%, -2% growth, what they'll call a recession. And then I believe if President Trump can get his stimulus in place, meaning, or not stimulus, get the tax cuts in place, get the tariffs, we're going to start seeing some stimulus in 2026 through rebate checks, other things that he's going to do to stimulate the economy. So I think, in my opinion, this year it's going to be a little difficult, Shannon, but I don't think it's going to be dangerous. Not like it was in 2008, 2009. We're not even close to that, in my opinion. And I talked to a lot of economists. So I think we're looking at an economy that's going to be relatively flat and overall. Again, going back to your circle of concern and your circle of influence or control, you got to go into what you can control within your business and get really focused on that and say, let's be excellent at it, and create a little sense of urgency in your organization with this news.
Going back to what you had talked about before, where you guys had, as of April 1st, you moved out of China, and you said, diversify your sourcing. Can you see any other shifts or anticipate any other shifts in some of the global manufacturing or any of the sourcing on the horizon that may be as a result from what's going on politically right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. One thing I don't see is any company or any country, I should say, being disadvantaged in a way. Maybe China is going to be a disadvantage, probably more than others, but I don't see anybody gaining a real significant advantage to these tariffs as of right now. Now, this policy can change, but as of right now, from everything that we're hearing, it feels like 10% the baseline. I don't think anybody's going to get 0% tariffs. I think 10% is going to be the basement. I think President Trump has been very clear about that. And then you're going to have countries that range between 10 and 20 or 25%. So it doesn't really position any country or as an advantage, right? So I don't believe that you're going to see a lot of movement in the supply chain. And I'll be honest, the dining tables, the bedroom furniture, Vietnam, Cambodia now is coming up, Malaysia, those are the best countries to buy in. I don't see even a close second to those countries as far as the furniture demand in the United States is concerned. So I really don't see a dramatic shift in the supply chain in the short term at all. Quite honestly, I don't see a dramatic shift in the supply chain long term overall, meaning the next 5 years. I think if we can come in at a tariff rate of 10 to 20% or 25%, the industry can absorb it. We can all absorb it and figure out how to adjust to it, with pricing and other things like that. But, I don't believe it's going to reconfigure the supply chains. The only thing I'll tell you is I think that upholstery has a big foundation that should be maximizing the United States. Bedroom furniture, if you can diversify your supply chain, I would have diversification around U.S. sourcing. And that's something we've done, even when times were tough. And maybe it wasn't the best investment in the world, Shannon. We said we got to double down, and we're now at a point where our factories are automated and efficient, where we can compete globally.
That makes total sense. So I've been blessed with lots of conversations with you. I know you don't think anyone's going to land at zero, and I know you're a very big proponent of fair trade. Can you explain why that's going to be beneficial to a retailer?
I don't think, number one, I think we're selling our furniture super cheap. So if you look at a tariff and say it's at 10% across the board, everybody gets 10%, right? And it's not like a big retailer or a small retailer is disadvantaged by this policy. There really isn't a fundamental change that you can do. So it's just going to cause a little bit of inflation. And again, 10% is not a ton of inflation in the marketplace. It's something, don't get me wrong. But, I look at what we're selling furniture for today versus what we sold it for 20 years ago. And you probably heard a lot of people say this. We're selling furniture really cheap today. It is an unbelievable value. And I think our industry overall, as long as the baseline goes up across the board, which I believe it will, I believe our industry overall is going to be fine. And our furniture is still very affordable compared to other products that are electronics or whatever else. Our furniture and the value of our furniture today is the best I've ever seen. And it's still very, very affordable overall. So I wouldn't be fearful of it. If it goes to 46%, it's a different story. If you're in China, you're 145%, it's a completely different story. I believe that a 10% tariff is not the end of the world. Even a 15% tariff isn't the end of the world. It's something that we can survive through. And I think everybody's got to study their business, their values, look at all alternatives. And of course, I'm waving the flag here a little bit, the Ashley flag, because we have a massive investment in infrastructure in the United States and manufacturing. And it does give you a lot of capability to navigate through whatever happens.
That's fair. What do you think though? Let's say the baseline does go up. What does that mean for the consumer and as a discretionary purchase, and then our share of that wallet? Like, what do you think? Like, what's your anticipation of what happens with consumer
Yeah,
spending?
we've studied this a lot. We've said we're not going to do anything until June 1st because we believe that there's a lot of other information coming out. I'm told now from people that we have from friends within the administration that they expect that Vietnam's probably going to get announced in the next 10 days. So we'll know what that tariff is hopefully in the next 10 days. And that's just rumors, okay? And then they're also saying that President Trump is going to start doing weekly announcements of trade deals. He's got to create some momentum, of course. So that's kind of the rumors that we're hearing at this point in time of what's going to occur. But we don't believe that we hit the price elasticity curve on product, meaning price goes up $50 on a sofa or whatever at retail. It's not going to kill it, right? It's not like you've hit a price elasticity curve and it becomes unaffordable. We looked at pretty much every commodity that we have, raw materials, because raw materials do get affected. Steel and wood also get affected by tariffs. And we just don't believe that we're hitting that price elasticity curve at all in most of our products. I'd say 90+% of our products. So I think as retailers think through their strategy, maybe they've got to downgrade a look if they want to get a $999 bedroom or look at a little different product. It's not going to be the same $999 bedroom as they have today, but they can still hit that price point. It's just a different strategy of how you're going to achieve it.
You do make an extremely valid point. Like, you've been reading the tea leaves, you've been aware of the information. This is not new information about how, from a global supply chain, that there were going to be changes. I know Ashley has doubled down on domestic production, and you guys have done an incredible job bringing robotics into your facilities. From your perspective, what's the real cost benefit equation for reshoring furniture for today and over the next 10 years?
Yeah, so I've talked to a lot of people about this, Shannon. A lot of people that have manufacturing globally, and they've talked about bringing it back to the United States. So my first cousin is actually an executive within Apple, and they're putting a $500 billion investment back in the United States, but it's automated. It's all automated. And that's the way furniture needs to come back too. Not saying that there isn't people in the process, but if you're going to bring it back and have it sustainable, because remember, we have a 4-year cycle of a president. So 4 years comes up and we get a new president in place, Republican or Democrat, and they don't believe in tariffs. It changes the dynamic completely, and you could have lost your whole investment because you made a bad decision. If you come back with automation and technology and say that's how we're going to build a factory in the United States, and you don't have as many people to build it and the physical costs of building it, and then I think you have a really good chance of doing business in the United States. If you're just going to take a product you make in Vietnam and say, I'm going to bring it back to the US with the same processes, same people, and you're paying people in Vietnam $2 an hour, and here you're paying them $25 an hour, it doesn't work. So you've got to come back and use robotics, automation, and find ways to make a product that's affordable. Otherwise, you're losing. And if manufacturing is going to come back losing in the next 3.5, 4 years as we get an administration change. So my view is if it's coming back, it's going to come back with automation and technology. But I'll also tell you that like a finished dining table with veneer, a finished bedroom set with veneer is hard to bring back. Number one, you have to get it approved by the EPA. There's a lot of work and sanding and other details that are very fine on that furniture. And there's some people that do it in the United States successfully. But I think on a mass scale, it would be hard to start up a factory and make it productive in the United States with how furniture is being made in foreign countries like Vietnam today. So it's got to come back being automated.
Makes complete sense. Obviously, you guys have learned a lot. Like this current reality is just kind of the 1-2 punch from COVID. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you've learned about supply chain agility since 2020, and does that even still apply today?
I don't know. I mean, that is probably the hardest questions that anybody would ever ask, because supply chain agility is, we've learned so much. I mean, I've been in this industry over 40 years, and quite honestly, up until 2020, we saw nothing like what we've seen in the last 5 years, including right now. It was relatively stable. You know, things change, but they change at a very slow pace. They're changing very, very fast right now. I'd say the most important thing is, just being connected and really understanding that. And, I know that a lot of people talk about tariffs. Our biggest problem right now isn't necessarily manufacturing globally, it's containers. We have a constraint between us, the United States, or anywhere else, and where the product's made, and it's called an ocean. And that ocean, you can't solve that problem. So there's no way to bring the freight in the United States. Certainly you can air freight it, but it's not affordable on furniture. Or you can come by ocean, and the container companies right now are hemorrhaging. With the China tariffs that were announced, 145%, $30 billion worth of business was canceled from mainland China. So all of those containers are sitting in mainland China, and Walmart's, Costco's, all those companies that we're not buying it, those companies have stopped shipping. It's all sitting in those factories and maybe on containers. So you got a massive problem with rebalancing the supply chain right now with containers. You can't predict those problems. You just can't. So you've got to make the best choices and decisions you can regarding supply chain, but you've got to always have option 1, option 2, option 3 available today and say, what do I do if this fails or this doesn't work? And I'll tell you, the other thing is, I talked about the container disruption. The container companies are doing blank sailings now because they got to reposition all the containers from mainland China. You have to have some buffered inventory in the United States. There's no choice, right? If the retailer can't buffer, we buffer inventory now. Our safety stock levels are almost a month more than they were going into COVID. So almost a month more inventory than we would typically hold. And we just do it because of all these little situations that happen all the time with blank sailings, container problems, other things that happen. We just added more inventory in the supply chain to make sure that we're as stable as we can possibly be.
For the retailers that are thinking beyond tariffs, obviously there's a lot of challenges, which I'd love to get your mind, like pick your brain about what other anticipated challenges that you're perceiving. But outside, like beyond tariffs, are there any other trade policies? I know global, like shipping out of China is a big one, but are there any other trade policies or even global economic factors that retailers really need to be paying closer attention to right now? Like, what are those tea leaves we should be reading?
Yeah, I mean, Section 301 is a new tariff that was announced. It's been in the works, but President Trump said he's going to enforce it, which is on any Chinese-built ship that comes to a U.S. port, that's going to be $1 million tax on each container ship that comes in. So that equates to, I've heard numbers as high as, depending on the size of ship, of course, numbers as high as $800 a container. That's in the works. There is a Section 232 tariff, which is on steel and wood. So what that means is you've got to go through every piece of furniture, weigh how much wood you have in that furniture, solid wood. And then there's based on weight and then an index that's applied by the government. You calculate the weight times the index and you pay a 25% tariff on that. And you do the exact same thing with steel. So let's take a recliner mechanism, for example. You've got to take the recliner out. You've got to weigh it, say how much steel's in that recliner mechanism. You multiply it times the factor that the government says is the standard for the steel price, and you pay a 25% duty on that. Both of those, I believe, are in works and may possibly be announced in October based on the government's desire to enforce them. So there's a lot of work being done. I think you're doing some work on it. HFA's involved in 232 for sure with HFA and trying to figure out how do we navigate this and understand that there is risk associated with it. But those are two that I'm aware of right now that they should definitely be thinking through. And I'll tell you, the other thing I just want to reiterate is that $750 billion number. So none of these tariffs, I don't think you can count on being 100% reliable. I think if President Trump wakes up in 6 months and he expects $750 billion in tariffs and he only gets $400 billion in tariffs, what do you think he's going to do? He's going to make up the difference. So I would not expect that any of this is set in stone for the next 3.5 years on these tariffs. Now, it's a risk. Again, I don't think that I would be in my circle of concern. It wouldn't be anything I'd be really focused on and saying it could happen because it could, it should, it might. But it's not something that it is a risk out there. And that's, again, why I think supply chain diversification is so important.
I think that's a good point. I mean, I've seen Ashley take a responsive. I've seen you guys experiment with blow molding on recliners. So would you say that that's within, like, from a retailer? I'm saying, like, in what ways can what can I control? Is that a piece of it? Is maybe considering down the line, am I still purchasing products that have these components, or where they're sourced? Like, what should a manufacturer, like, what should a retailer be thinking about?
Yeah, I don't think that, I think there's a pretty good argument on why not to do it with the furniture industry. And I believe there's going to be exceptions. So I'm just talking about these globally as risks. I think that the container issue is a real one because President Trump wants to see more shipbuilding done in the United States. So I think he's going to try to give an advantage to ships being built in the United States. So I think that's real. Nothing we can control. It's applied to pretty much 60% of the freight that comes to the United States. It is what it is. But the steel and wood, I don't know if I'd be overly concerned about right now and try to reposition my supply chain.
What advice would you give to some of the retailers who are, I mean, again, I hear your message very, very clear, and I hope everyone else is too. Focus on what you can control, stay within your circle of where you can actually influence, make decisions. But if you were standing in the shoes of a retailer who is trying to forecast pricing and product flow with just the uncertainty, specifically like if they're getting product overseas, what advice would you give someone that's doing that, maybe outside of just focus on what you can control?
Yeah, Shannon, I'll be honest, and we've discussed this a lot. I don't know where you buy some of this stuff. I mean, where else are they going to go? So you get a veneer dining table, veneer bedroom set, and it's at a certain style, certain design. You can't go to China, right? Because that's out of the game. Where else are you going to go? So what do you change? You can't change anything. So it's pretty much find a way to absorb as much as you can within your company and determine what you have to pass on to the customer. So I see a lot of people, I know a lot of people that cancel their container orders, for example. I'm like, okay, where are you going to buy it from? You really have no other choice. So I can't say that from my perspective, and we've, again, debated this a lot. What should we change? How should we pivot? What should we do? From my perspective, I would say, I don't know if I would change anything today. You have too little information at this point in time to react. And I don't know where you go for a lot of this stuff in light of that. Again, upholstery, you got plenty of options domestically. Paper laminated bedroom and maybe even some wood veneer bedroom, you got plenty of options domestically from us and others, right? So I would always have that diversification in place. Motion, stationary upholstery. I'd look at my lineup and say, what are my domestic alternatives versus my import alternatives? And I'd probably be leaning really heavy into those because I do believe that this container problem is going to be a big problem. I think this rebalance in the supply chain because of these tariffs, specifically around China, is going to cause a lot of issues. And if you want to do any research, right now you can do research on blank sailings with container companies. And I think you'll be shocked at what's been happening over the last 2 weeks because they'll just cancel a sailing completely because the containers aren't properly positioned. And if you know anything about containers, a lot of container ships start up in China. They'll head down to Vietnam, they'll pick up freight along the way, and then they come to the United States. If you lose legs of that, right, let's say that Shanghai has nothing shipping right now, the ship's going to sit. And because it won't be full coming out of Vietnam, so they do a blank sailing at that point in time. They just don't come. So that's one of the big disruptions that I see probably affecting us more so than even tariffs, is that whole supply chain disruption around finished goods as it flows into the United States.
That's a valid point. I was talking to another retailer manufacturer, and they were saying, they were paying $5,500, for 4 cans in February, and then by March they were shipping at 1650 for the same 4 cans. They hadn't seen prices like that since back in 2019. So I think, obviously you guys are seeing this firsthand. What I forgot to mention at the beginning of this is if there's anybody with questions, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to chat in, and we'll get to as many questions as time does allow. But I'm going to ask you as we pivot, or is there something you wanted to say before we pivot, Todd?
And the other thing I'll tell you, that 1650, the container companies do not want that. So remember, you got a constraint. They understand, they learned a lot during COVID, supply and demand. So they're limiting supply in the marketplace at the same time. So blank sailings are partially caused by this rebalance. The other part is they don't want to see the prices collapse. So they're doing a whole game, and I've watched this over 40 years on how it's played. And they're just playing a game of supply and demand. If I put too much supply in the market, there's not enough demand, prices go down. So they're rebalancing that constantly. And obviously, these tariffs are throwing a big amount of difficulty their way, and conflict or difficulty their way, I should say. And I think that they're trying to figure this out, and they're not going to let prices collapse.
I mean, I think we all felt that at $22,000 plus a container.
Right.
We know that there's some resilience there. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about if you were the retailer. So I'm asking you to put on your retailer hat and help us advise. If you were a retailer, what are the top 3 challenges outside of maybe around this or outside of this that you think are going to affect me in this year, and how should I consider overcoming them?
Well, number one, I'd make sure my supply chain's stable. I would work on supply chain stability, most importantly, and make sure that you're going to be able to survive whatever happens, right? Things will go up, things will go down in demand, but the whole tariff thing, the container issue, I'd really, really make sure that I have diversification, and if possible, put a little more safety stock in place, or have a vendor like us put safety stock in place, and make sure that we're in a good place, which we are. That's the number one thing. Number two, it still does come back to the experience for the consumer. You've got to find a way to, number one, connect with the consumer. There's no question that you look at traditional TV and traditional media, still important, but less important. You've got to be socially really capable of connecting with your customers and staying connected with your customers. And great companies do that very, very well. Companies like a Nike and other organizations like that, and many furniture companies do it very well. I'd focus on that. And then second thing is I'd make sure that the experience within the store is super solid. And I think the future of the store, Shannon, is very good. As long as your store is relevant, it's updated, it's clean, your sales staff is properly trained. I think that there's still an awful lot of people at any age bracket that still want to go into the store and buy things. And I think that that's going to have that's a massive opportunity for us, because the physical brick and mortar is there in many cases. How do you upgrade the experience and make it world class? All the way through to delivery, salespeople, greeting, look and feel of the store. All of those things have to be world class.
So this is a really good point. I think that this really focuses on, if you were to segment the $210-ish billion that the industry is producing annually, and you segment into 3 sections. We go brands that are consumer direct, brands that are selling on marketplaces, and maybe a third of the industry that's selling brick and mortar. If you're a retailer, how do you stay competitive in this environment where you're competing with the large chains, the known names, the direct to consumer brands? Like I did hear you say, really focus on that in-store experience, but even beyond that, how do you compete?
You can tell your story. Who are you? What are your values? What do you do for your communities? I think that, the smaller retailers have a massive advantage compared to big chains, especially with community connections and making sure that they're socially relevant locally. I think it's a big advantage. I think it's all about the experience. It's all about the connection, developing that local flavor, and making sure that you're doing a great job talking about the local communities, be involved in your church and any place else that you can meet employees, and then just make them your social ambassadors. And, many people talk about getting social influencers. Well, imagine if you're in a small town, you can find social ambassadors all over the place. You don't have to pay them. You just have to take care of them and have them tell their friends and family. So, that's where I think the smaller retailers can win. I mean, we have things like Warehouse 335, which is a mixing warehouse in Vietnam. It gives people the ability to flow goods on a mixed basis by one set of this, one set of that, one set of that. We have our US facilities that are able to do the same thing. But yeah, I think that they've got an amazing opportunity, but they have to have a differentiated story in their stores and a differentiated look than what you get from anybody else.
That's absolutely fair. One of my favorite questions that came in was very direct. Please help me avoid making a bad move. If you are running if you as we're a retailer and you are running a small size store today, or small to mid size store, where would you not spend money right now?
That's really a good question. I certainly would not cut my advertising budget. I mean, that's one of the areas I would not spend money. Um, I would focus on cash flow completely. And I would find a way to get as much cash flow in my business as possible. And that typically comes through inventory, that comes through other things that you can do. And I just focus on cash flow. Maybe take a little bit of Doge, and what they're doing and not decimate your organization, but be super tight and super lean. But the most important thing, I've seen so many companies fail in our industry, and they've always failed because of inadequate cash flow. And that can be incoming sales, and that can be poor inventory management and poor management of the business from an expense standpoint. So that's where I would be focused. And, I would make sure that I would never cut advertising. That's the last thing you cut. And in many cases, that's the first thing a lot of people cut. I'd look at efficiency of advertising. Do I feel I'm really making a difference? There's people that do a lot of A/B testing, turn this off and see what happens for a month. Turn this on, see what happens for a month, and then do all that A/B testing, data to data over a 30-day period of time and see what happens. But I would definitely want to be pulling people in my stores as much as possible, because if top line falls, it's hard to cut fast enough.
Fair. So for those that are looking at the cash flow and they're looking at how they're holding inventory, like what advice would you give someone that's trying to balance inventory investment, like as of right now, and look at what they've maybe always done for their inventory strategy and getting cash flow more positive?
Well, it's a whole GMROI formula. I mean, you've got to be getting, in a typical retail operation, most people get 3 or 4 turns out of their inventory a year. I mean, that's just not acceptable. You got to work on 12, 15 turns a year, which is at least once a month. And you've got to find ways to get that cash flow really efficient and flow the goods as quickly as possible. And if you can have a model, I don't want to say it's special order, but if you can have a model in a small retail operation, specifically as things get tight and maybe the consumer gets a little tight, and you're basically selling and delivering in a couple of weeks without holding the inventory, that's a big deal. That helps a lot when you start talking about a typical business.
That's fair. There are a few questions that have come in. We're going to get to, because we're going to, toward the end of this, we're going to talk a little bit more about technology and tech innovation. But let's talk a little bit more about just some of the opportunities that the current economy is giving us right now. So obviously a lot of retailers are feeling the pinch, just with this uncertainty. Where do you see the biggest growth opportunities for home furnishings in today's economy?
I think we have areas, I think upholstery for us as a company has exploded. I mean, the sectional business, and if I go back 10 years ago, our sectional business is probably 25% of our total volume. It's now over 60% of our total volume. So sectionals, configurable things, we have Novella fabrics, which are washable. I think innovation is super important right now. How do you innovate and how do you tell stories? So when somebody walks in the door, it's not like, hi, welcome to my store. Instead of, hi, welcome to my store. Let me show you what's new. Let me show you a washable cover in a sectional. Let me show you the modularity that's available within your home. Let me show you, the new sleep experience. All those things become very important to be able to do within a retail organization and get it to thrive. So I believe that storytelling is one of the most important things that you can do inside of a retail operation to give people a reason, your salespeople a reason to attract consumers to an area and give them a compelling story of why they need that product.
Now, how have you actually seen the consumer behavior shift through all this?
Well, going back to the segments I started down, number one, we're seeing the category of bedroom furniture be tough. It's the new homes, right? Typically, people don't replace bedrooms as quickly as they replace other things. Primarily upholster furniture because that gets stained, it gets other things happen to it, cushions get flat, mattresses, other things like that in the home that are heavily used. So we're seeing the buying cycle on those not deteriorate at all. On bedroom furniture, it's getting a little bit slower. We hope as housing starts come back up that we'll see it improve. But I think that the consumer is a little more frugal, and I think financing is super important. That's probably the one thing that I could recommend for most stores, and I know you're a big advocate of as well, is you got to have strong financing and a strong financing culture. If you're not doing 40-50% of your volume in a finance mechanism, I think you're making a massive mistake. And I would say that's long-term financing, 24 to 60-month financing. That'll drive your average ticket up. That'll bring more consumers into the funnel, and give you many more opportunities to be able to sell. So I think that as the consumer gets more pinched on cash, you've got to look at that and say, what alternatives can I do? And what waterfall can I put in place? A first, second, third look to be able to take care of those customers. And I know you're a great source for that. You guys have great assets to be able to help retailers through it. And that's one of the big areas that, as you look forward, that I think every retailer should be leaning in really heavy.
That's one of the things we see the most is that, I think it's easy to look at the 12-month rate and say, well, it's the cheapest way to do business. It also doesn't help the consumer and the impact. I mean, if we think about the consumer right now, you're going to have 5+ million people who are going to be having to pay some student loans, and you're going to see changes with their expendable income, and you're going to get a higher ticket average and a lower cost price. And it's been such a key part of your strategy. I know one of your biggest partners is like Rent-A-Center, but they have really mastered that strategy of recognizing that low cost model to get products and furnitures does actually increase ticket average. And we can't say that enough. In fact, I'll put this as a teaser, but we HFA's rates are going to be dropping July 1, so we're going to be helping everything we can to get the lowest rates that are possible for financing on that 12, 24, etc.
Refusal, and I'll just tell you, Acima is an amazing company. They do great work. I mean, the retail stores that I'm aware of usually do like a Synchrony, Concora, Acima type waterfall. And in that waterfall, you'll walk through with 90% approvals if you do it effectively. And if you think about that versus what you're traditionally getting, and say you only have first look, I mean, you may end up at 70%. But imagine if you capture that other 20%. You need to be really good at that as a retailer, and teach your people how to sell financing and make it super important. Because again, the consumers they're on a checkbook right now, and they're financially constrained. So having alternatives like that are very important.
I think that's such a valid point. Everyone always asks the question. I think we came on asking this today is like, Todd, you understand financial strategy. How does that work? And a big piece of that is make it easy for people to purchase, right? And so don't be afraid of spending, of giving up some of your margin to get a bigger ticket average or getting something bigger into your customer's home.
Bingo.
Yeah, we can't stress that enough either. So shifting a little bit to, you talked about this before. We're in a very scrappy forward, multi-generational industry. And we also talk a lot about generational strategy. What do you see as the biggest mistake that legacy retailers make as they are trying to evolve?
Yeah, I think my dad says this super well. He's like, you got to make business fun, right? And I see a lot of businesses in the furniture industry that aren't having fun. You got to make it fun. You got to attract young people to your business that really are here to do fun things, because this industry has the ability to touch consumers in a way nobody else can. You go into the home, and you create a home of comfort. You create a home of, beautiful living, beautiful lives, places they can socialize with their family and friends, and the environments you can create are just unbelievable. And I think just getting people excited about home furnishings and bringing young talent into your organization. We do have an industry that's getting older. When I look around, I'm 61 now, unfortunately, or for, I guess, a little bit of both. It's an industry that's getting older, and we got to get younger people in. And the people that I grew up with are my age, of course. And it's making it fun, making it exciting, and making sure that it feels like an industry that's going somewhere, or a company that's going somewhere. And I think that's probably the most important thing that a lot of companies fail at. It's like, well, we just sell furniture. No, we don't. We sell experiences. We sell comfortable homes. We have the ability to touch people and go into their homes and do things in ways that nobody else can. Isn't that exciting? That's an amazing opportunity that we have as an industry.
Yeah, I think that's best echoed in like when you look at the R House model, is they did a great job of capturing the Abercrombie and Fitch consumer, right? That customer that was used to a certain showroom and a certain set, and there was so much of that showrooming that's now buying furniture with their money, and there is that fun, very specific experience when you go into a store like that.
So
So, coming back to that retailer, what do you think thinking about the industry and just, in some aspects we have an echo chamber, right? We're all kind of living inside of a system and a structure that we've all created. So what do you think there's a belief that our industry is holding that is just completely outdated, but people are really still clinging to it that maybe we need to reconsider, reimagine?
great question. I study technology an awful lot, and I think that we all get stuck in traditional TV with advertising, but I also think we all get stuck in what's happening around us and maybe not seeing it before others see it. The job of a leader is to see things faster and better than others see it, and then being able to articulate that into a strategy for their business. And I think that technology is going to be one of those things. And I don't know if it's VR yet. I think it's still early days on VR. But I think that there's an awful lot of things that we have to do with AI. And I think that I know there's a question around this, but I think that AI has the ability to provide more information for our RSAs, retail sales associates, our delivery people. And we need to get great at harnessing the data that we own within our businesses, because we have so much data on customers, so much, right? What do they buy? When did they buy? What's their life experiences? Many companies have 200 or 300 data points on a consumer, right? We've got to build those data points as an industry and understand how to connect better. And then when somebody comes into the store, typically the training process for an RSA is, okay, you come in and we have a marketing specialist show up or a sales rep and they teach them. There's a lot of capability with AI and ways you can teach it and use it within your operation to get fast information for the RSAs and the customers are walking through. And I think our blind spot as an industry has traditionally been accepting those things and accepting the pass on them because, yeah, it's difficult. And I don't think that AI in the future is going to be expensive. I really don't. I think there's going to be millions of apps out there that you can use, applications. And it's not going to be super expensive to put in place. I think it's going to be very affordable, and I think it's going to go fast. But the most important thing that's going to happen right now is you must, as an owner of a business, have a viewpoint in how you're going to use technology. You must have a viewpoint in how you're going to use technology.
And I know your team has really explored different applications on the parts of the business. The attendees that are here really want to know what's the most practical use case for AI, and coming from a place of real example, not theory. So can you walk us maybe through some different examples of use cases on how to employ AI? Not conceptually, but like really, where should they be looking at putting AI in?
So I'll just give you some examples for us. So our accounts payable right now is all done through AI, completely. We used to have, not completely, there's still people that check it just to make sure it's right. Because we don't want to make any mistakes. But that's all done through AI. Our forecasting as a company is very close to be done through AI. There's many, many practical applications. What you have to do is literally take your business and say, where are my redundant tasks? It could be in a call center, right? It can be in, paying your bills. It can be other areas like that are redundant, mundane tasks that can be replaced. And what you want to do is take the human being to a creative work. The person that's doing that job, let them do something creative, not just order entry on a screen all day or key punching all day. That's not something that's going to last. Our world should be creative. Our people should be creative. And I think we'll be able to basically free up their time. So the way we did it is we broke everything down and said, okay, let's go through all these tasks, look at all of our people. And I'm not trying to eliminate people. I'm trying to move our people into more productive jobs. I don't think that this AI shouldn't be looked at as a threat. It's like the buggy whip when they went to a car, right? Everybody's all concerned because the buggy whip industry is going to go away, but we went to the car. This is the same thing. AI is going to be the same thing for us. It's going to give us, the job's going to be different, but you almost need to break them down and say, okay, where are all my mundane tasks? Where are all my people? What are they doing? And how do I automate it? And we've done that work, to say, look at all the stupid things that we're doing in the business, so to speak. Why should somebody be in the middle of this process? We're just launching a production scheduling AI app for our company to do production scheduling for all of our factories. We're going from a 5-day lead time to less than 2 days. And the rest was just human error, not human error, human intervention, where they were doing order entry and keystroking and taking from one file to another file. That stuff's all got to go away, and you've got to automate, and that gives you speed, that gives you accuracy, information to be able to deal with in the appropriate way.
That makes sense. So, one of our viewers has asked the question is, how do you see technology? What do you see in technological change for the industry? Like, is that going to be outside of AI? Will that be in 3D visualization, or do you anticipate even beyond AI that being something else?
Yeah, so we do CGI on everything that we have as a company. All of our we do digital assets on every single piece of furniture, and we've been watching this space quite a bit. I mean, I just don't. VR to me isn't ready. It's not game time, and there's some room planner stuff that you can do right now, but I just don't see that being ready today. 5 years from now, maybe it's going to be ready, but today it's not. And what you should do is prepare yourself. Have as many digital assets as possible, so when it does come in place, you can then evolve to it rather than waiting for the technology to get right. Build the assets and the capabilities so you can go when it's ready.
What does that look like? Like being able to shop for furniture through a VR experience?
Yeah, I think so, but I just don't see people putting VR headsets on right now. Now, the Meta glasses, I'm seeing more people wear Meta glasses, right? I'm seeing things like that happen, but I don't see, we tried it, bringing people into a store and putting on VR headsets and doing all that work. They don't want to do it.
Yeah.
They don't want to put them on.
Yeah.
And, maybe they want to mess up their hair, they're concerned about germs. But I think that's a little bit of a problem. You could do a lot of things with your phones through apps, space planning and stuff like that, but I just see that as a long tail thing.
Sure.
VR.
Yeah, I was going to say the short battery life is the only thing keeping my kids with their VR headsets off at this point. So I think that we're talking about that future generation, but we've got a little time for those 7-year-olds are digging into the wallets. A couple of questions that came up around Ashley's specifically. How does Ashley's domestic foam pouring strategy impact your sourcing strategy and feed your manufacturing side from a retail value proposition perspective?
Great question. So we already have our Verona foam pouring up and running. We're launching Advance in Whitehall, Wisconsin, Advance, North Carolina, over the next 12 to 24 months. That just gets us vertical integration. So we've been able to upgrade the quality of our foam specs and also vertically integrate and take out a layer of cost. So that's been a big advantage for us for sourcing raw materials, making sure we really understand all the cost components with it, and really passing on the value to our customers in a better quality product and lower price.
That's completely fair. There was another question that came up about discounting and using financing, and whether we should be focused on savings or problem solution as in selling. One of the things that I hear the most in the industry is how do you create that feeling of home, and is there ever a world where furniture is not a discretionary spend, but where do we focus? Is it, I mean, obviously as an industry, we focused on keeping the cost the same as, you can still get the same $100 mattress or, $400 recliner that you did 20 years ago, but where should we be focused in furniture? Is it on the problem? Is it on emotions? Is it on savings? Like, where in your perspective should that be?
I think our industry has long ago moved away from wants versus needs, right? We don't need necessarily another piece of furniture, another dining table, or another bedroom set. There's a lot to go around, right? Whether it's coming from the parents or I have one that's worn out or whatever. So we are really more of a want-based industry. Maybe it's 70-30 want, 30% need based on I'm buying a new house and I need it. So I think there's got to be an emotional connection. The utilitarian individual is just looking for something to solve a problem. They're there, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's the biggest part of the market. I think the biggest part of the market is aspirational. And to get an aspirational customer, you've got an inspirational experience. Something when they walk in the store, they're sitting on the furniture, they're seeing a pleasant environment. And I think that that's a big part of it. The other thing we didn't talk about that I think is important right now, de minimis rules are being put in place. And I think everybody knows what de minimis is. For packages less than $800, they were shipped directly from China or Canada or other countries duty-free in the United States, primarily sold through Amazon and other players. That's going away, and it is going away, and that's going to change the landscape of competition. The other thing that we know for a fact is a lot of the D2C companies had a massive Chinese sourcing strategy, massive, in furniture. And that Chinese sourcing strategy is going away. Well, guess what? That's going to cause a lot of disruption in the supply chain. A lot of those consumers should be going into furniture stores now, and in our supply chain, meaning our customers and brick and mortar stores. So I think that is a tail probably underestimated a little bit in the industry, even though it may slow down. I think you're going to get more of those people coming into your stores.
There. You'd mentioned earlier a little bit on engagement. I wanted to circle back on a question that came in. So can we talk a little bit about, there's a lot of hints on the board that social commerce is going to be out, obviously already outpacing e-com, but it's projected to outpace e-com by 4x in less than 3 years. And I know live shopping streams is another piece of that, which makes that like e-com is going to be less of a destination. I think marketplaces are currently serving as the digital mall, right? As malls aren't that thing, but what are you doing that can help retailers on this?
It's a great question. So you're talking about TikTok Shop and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And social influence shopping. China's light years ahead of us on this. If you go to mainland China, you're going to see we're probably 5 to 10 years behind them on social commerce or TikTok Shop or things like that. Where you see things in an ad or in pops up and you can buy it. There's a tremendous amount of capabilities got to get added to the U.S. And what we're trying to do is just build the framework for it, right? Understand what does it mean, what does it look. We're in more early adoption phases right now, and we've got to develop a plan for our dealers to be able to keep up. But TikTok Shop is one of the fastest growing e-commerce platforms out there right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely one of the things on the horizon that we all need to understand. My kids buy more from that than they do from Amazon, right? So I'm sure you're probably going through the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's good to kind of watch, like you were saying, it's your job as a leader to see things faster. But like one thing that people should be considering is the person that built the retail segment of the head of TikTok just moved over and is leading the head of home for Pinterest. Right. And so this is like one of the considerations that people should be thinking of, is looking at how that experience is going to influence the next version of that shopping journey. And I think that that's a really big one. HFA is on the front end of that. As this industry, obviously this industry is very, very heavily influenced by new home builds. Do you have any anticipation on when we might see some improvements on the housing market? And obviously that's part of the growth thing that you said hasn't been addressed. There has to be some stimulants. There probably has to be some break-in rates. Do you see anything on the forecast? And, really, do you believe home furnishings is going to continue to be as positively impacted by a healthy housing market as it was in the past when it was need-based?
Yeah, well, you and I were talking about Jerry Epperson before we got on the live cast. And, Jerry is a big proponent that this new demographic coming up, the young people that are just getting married and getting out of school and getting jobs, they need homes, and we are undersupplying homes by millions of homes. So obviously when demand goes down or interest rates go down, hopefully raw material prices come down, we should see a massive increase in homes. And I'm hoping that starts in 2025 or even later this year, because I think they're saying now, next meeting, they expect a 1/4 point drop in interest rates. We're now starting to get to an interesting point. I think everybody's always said the tipping point is right around 6%. That's when they see everything flip and things take off. Well, we're getting close. And I think it's very interesting. I think that the weakness in the economy to a certain degree has brought a lot of homes down in price, which is good too. So, as you start talking about new home sales, it's also existing home sales have been slow because it's been so expensive. We're seeing a lot of reduced prices. So I think you've got a lot of dynamics that are really working in our favor right now that should hopefully come home to roost sometime next year. I also heard that that's one of the stimulus packages that Donald Trump wants to roll out, or President Trump wants to roll out, which is new home buyers with some help on, payment of their loans or, incentives to go and buy a new home. So that's also got a massive opportunity if that does happen.
That's fair. As you look over the next 5 years, what's most exciting to you about the future of our industry?
I really get excited about technology. I'll be honest. So, I look at this and say the adopters of the technology are going to really have a massive advantage. And I think everybody's got to be curious on it. But, I think that we're in an interesting inflection point in our industry right now, because I do know that demand is lower than it probably should be if we were in a traditional environment. I think there's a lot of fear around tariffs and stock market, and I think we're going to see a lot of growth. I think we are in a great industry right now. And again, if you go back and look at demographics, the demographics are in our favor, like we've never seen before, right? We got a big boom coming through a population that hasn't formed homes, hasn't bought homes. And as that starts happening over the next, hopefully 12 to 60 months, we should see a massive tailwind as an industry.
Fair. And then one of my last questions for you. What gives you hope about this next generation of our retail leaders?
I just see so much talent. I really do. And, the beauty of being in the furniture industry is, again, you meet a lot of people over and over again, like at trade shows. I'm at High Point Market right now. And I just meet people over and over again. And I see the second and third generation coming in these families, and they're smart, really smart, and really, really curious and great people and technology savvy. That's what excites me. I think that the future of this industry is probably stronger than I've ever seen it. And, it's interesting. My dad was, we were doing a presentation this morning. My dad was going back to 2001, and 50% of the top 100 retailers are basically gone that were in place in 2001. They're no longer in business. And you've seen these charts before. You share those charts. And you look at that, it's like, why didn't they survive? Well, number one, they probably didn't build a great team. And I see many people building great teams. They put their head in the sand and said, everything's just going to be okay. They didn't want to invest back in their companies, and they didn't keep up with changes in the marketplace. And Charles Darwin says it best: he who adapts to change will survive. And that's what we all have to do.
Absolutely. So I just want to touch on some of the really make sure, and if you tuned in late, I want to make sure you're taking away some of the juice of what he shared today. Focus on what you can control, I think, is my biggest takeaway. Look at your circle of influence. If you haven't read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it's probably time to read that and focus on that. The first one, focus on what you can control. Diversify and look at, again, what's within your control, stable supply chain, and how you engage with your customers, what your showroom experience is, and how you tell your story. Really looking at your cash flow and make smart decisions. That you've seen that the reason retailers go out of business is they're not looking at their inventory as cash, and they're also not maybe looking at how they need to reduce expenses within that model. But whatever you do, don't pull back on that advertising strategy. You need to be front and center of people's minds. And gosh, there's so many juices. And I'm gonna have 5 pages of notes that I could probably lean into. What's the last thing that you need to share that maybe we didn't touch on that people need to leave today and really be thinking about?
I think that I do a gratitude Sunday email every Sunday, and I try to encourage my team as much as possible. I think leadership's job is to make sure that everybody has a positive mindset, positive outlook. And again, there's a lot of noise in the marketplace today. We talk about circle of control, circle of concern. I mean, you definitely need to be aware of that. But leaders need to be inspirational. Leaders need to have a strong vision and strong values on who they are. There's a saying that we share. John Maxwell, who's a business author, over 100 business books, wrote it. And it says, if you don't know who you are, the world will tell you. If you don't know what you want, the world will tell you. If you don't know your values, the world will tell you. In other words, be pure. Know exactly what your intentions are and what you want to achieve. And I think no matter where you are in a company or in business, those are really, really important stories. Because if you're pure on your values and you stick with them every single day, if you know who you are as a retailer and as an employer, if you know what you want to achieve, you'll get it done. And just maintain a positive attitude and go after it every single day with grit and determination.
Good. One of the books you recommended to me and that you could put everyone should put this on their reading list was Carol Dweck's Mindset, and just getting in that. So Todd, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with me today. Like, I know that this is highly valuable for everyone here. I know we'll get a chance to see you at market, but thank you, because I think this is a tough time for everybody, but this is the time that make or breaks businesses. And I think, keeping that positive mindset, bringing us and focus on the business, focusing on what we can control and not being afraid of this next step, but really embracing it, innovating it. Tariffs alone aren't going to build a domestic industry. We need to pair this with infrastructure and innovation and investment. And if I've heard anything, you're leading us through this, and you're showing us that vision. And so it's our job as an industry to rebuild that. So thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you.
Shannon, I want to thank you. You're amazing. You do a great job educating people and keeping retailers at top of mind, to make sure you do what you can to make them successful. So thank you very much.
We appreciate that. So before we leave, we just want to thank Synchrony, who is our education thought leadership sponsor. You heard it very loudly from both of us. use financing in your strategy, consider how you're using that. But really, thank you, Synchrony, for making today possible, and Todd. And then if you want to recap this webinar, it's going to be available online at myhfa.org/webinar. So go back, watch it, throw it through AI, get your notes, and maybe make it into something inspirational that you send your staff every Sunday. Nick, come and join us this week. We have an incredible week lined up at High Point. We have Jerry Epperson speaking on Sunday morning. This might be his last market. And if you have not, and he's going to be in person, so please make it down to our showroom at Sunday at 9. He's got so many beautiful, he knows this industry. And if you're not getting your one last chance to really get the mind of Jerry Epperson, if you've never done it, this is your chance. Make it happen. And for those of you not joining us at High Point, get our next webinar. It's on Thursday, May 8th. We're going to be talking about how to build high-performing sales teams. So as Todd alluded to today, that in-store experience matters. It's got to be fun. Your salespeople are going to help drive that. We're going to talk about how to build and coach and lead a high-performing sales team, and then more proven strategies to design and drive the results for your store. Thank you for tuning in today, and thank you for allowing and trusting HFA to help drive your business success.
Thank you.
Take care, Todd.
See you later, Shannon.